All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our fourth live backstage event. For those of you who are returning, welcome back. It's good to see you again. For those of you who are new, welcome. It's also really good to see you. My name is Gina, and I'm the producer. I'll be handling a lot of the behind the scenes things today, including keeping an eye out for your questions. So at any time during this webinar, you have a question for our guest, feel free to put it in our chat and I'll make sure it gets asked. I'll also be keeping track of audio and visual things, so you might see my eyes darting around or me clicking on things. I'm just trying to keep things moving forward. To use that as a good transition for myself, I'm going to bring up our host for today. So I'd love to welcome you all to Sarah Jackson. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, everyone. Happy fall. I'm so excited to be here. We cannot wait to get to today's show. We've got a great opening act. Before we get to our opening act, though, I do want to thank our sponsors that always support us. We want to thank Contact Monkey. They do really great webinars, too, that they've got a few coming up. We'll put them in the follow-up email. So check them out. Thank you so much, Contact Monkey, for all your support so we can offer all these wonderful resources. The other one I want to thank is Cerkl. Check out Cerkl. They have got an entire suite built from the ground up for internal communicators. This amazing new product that they just launched called Broadcast that's helping so many of our internal communicators really innovate, but kind of also lighten their workload. So check that out also today. Thanks to Cerkl. So now what I want to do, I'm super excited about our opening act. As you all know, every backstage begins with an opening act. And this idea actually started with our guest today. A couple years ago, I was at the Advanced Learning Institute and I was emceeing an event, and there was another communicator there. His name is Greg. We're going to introduce him here in just a little bit. And I was talking about just different interests, and you know how you go to the happy hours and you talk to different internal communicators. And he had mentioned, we both mentioned our love for musicals and how he actually does this bit from The Music Man. And I don't know if we have a lot of folks that are not from the US that join our show. And so if you're not kind of from here, I want to show you a little bit about The Music Man and a particular song they sing in this musical that's about trouble. And since we're in a time period now about trouble in cities with everything going on, let me show you this clip. And then Greg is actually going to perform a bit from The Music Man. So let's play this now so you can kind of get a sense of this musical and how it feels and sounds. Oh, I'm on the wrong one.
Instinct, mass hysteria. Friends, the idle brain is the devil's playground. Trouble! Oh, we got trouble. Right here in River City. Right here in River City. With a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool.
So he's singing about, trouble that's in the city. So without further ado, I'd like to bring up Greg. If Gina, you wouldn't mind bringing up Greg's video, and we'll stop sharing our screen so we can introduce him to our audience. Hi, Greg, we're here.
Hi, guys.
So Greg, I know you and I got connected and we were talking about you doing this bit for so many audiences and in PR trainings. And I said, my big dream would be that I would host an internal comms conference and have internal communicators that had all these amazing talents that would open all of our shows. And we're now we're doing it. We're actually making the dream happen. So why don't you tell a little bit about the kind of communication work that you do, and then we would love to hear your bit from The Music Man.
Well, I found myself actually in the minority in the conference that you and I attended in Chicago. I am in the government sector. Most of the people I was with were in the private sector, but I've been doing government public relations since the mid-1980s. It seems to fit my personality fairly well, actually. And I was at the conference there and met with Sarah. And we shared, as she mentioned, both our love of musical theater. And this is a role that I have wanted to play for many, many years. I have not had a chance to ever do it, but I've done pieces of it. And I'm now going to do a very small part of it. That it'll give you a little taste of the part that I would love to play sometime if I don't get too old to do it. A pool table, don't you understand? Friend, either you're closing your eyes to a situation you do not wish to acknowledge, or you are not aware of the caliber of disaster indicated by the presence of a pool table in your community. Well, you got trouble, my friend. Right here I say trouble, right here in River City. Why, sure, I'm a billiard player, certainly mighty proud to say it. I'm always mighty proud to say it. I consider it the hours I spend with the cue in my hand are golden. Help me cultivate horse sense with a cool head and a keen eye. Did you ever take and try to get an ironclad lead for yourself from a three-rail billiard shot? But just as I say, it takes judgment, brains, and maturity to score in a ball-playing game. I say that any boob can take and shove a ball in a pocket. And I call that sloth. The first big steps on the road to the depths of degradation. I say first.
I love that.
That is amazing. Awesome. I love it. I'm going to share our screen. So then we've got a little bonus for our audience. As Greg and I were talking, we thought, what a creative idea is to take a musical like this, to not only perform it, but we actually changed the words for the audience to make it around internal comms. And Greg actually filmed a bit of himself doing this with the new words that we are actually going to share with you right now. So this is the same bit, the same song, but using words that are relevant for the time of period that us internal communicators find ourselves in.
A pandemic, don't you understand? Friend, either you're closing your eyes to a situation you do not wish to acknowledge, or you are not aware of the caliber of disaster indicated by the presence of COVID-19 in your community. Well, you got trouble, my friend. Right here I say trouble, right here in every city. Why, sure, I'm a communications pro, certainly mighty proud to say it. I'm always mighty proud to say it. I consider that the hours I spend with a pen in my hand are golden. Help me cultivate messages with a cool head and a keen eye. Did you ever take and try to engage employees with no budget at all with email, mobile, and intranet? But just as I say, it takes judgment, brains, and maturity to score in the communications game. I say that any pro can take the tools they are given, engage employees for a living. The first big steps on the road to the depths of engagement, I say first.
I love it. I love it so much. Greg, thank you for being so open and vulnerable to share your whole self with our audience. And who knows, maybe one day if we're ever back in a big stage in person, you're definitely going to be our opening act to get to do that full spiel of the Music Man.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Sarah. Good to see you.
All right, friends. Well, now we are headed into our very, very special guest. I'm so excited to introduce our next guest with you. His name is Tarek Kamil. As you guys know, Tarek and Cerkl have been such a huge support to Internal Comms Pro. Tarek, welcome to the show, CEO and founder of Cerkl.
That was unbelievable. It's like every rapper should take lessons from him. That was so good.
Seriously.
It was really good. And thanks for having me on the show, Gina. Good to see you. Sarah, thanks for having me.
Well, Tarek, I know that you were our most recent podcast guest, and we talked about this idea of what gets internal communicators their official ticket into the leadership club. And it was all a series on ROI. And so that's what we are going to talk about today and give some highlights. We've got some questions coming in around ROI that people wanted to follow up with you from the episodes. If you haven't checked it out, everyone, we'll put a link to this series in our follow-up email today. Go check it out. Tarek talks all about ROI. So we're going to share our screen and kind of just get into it. We know our show is only, 30 minutes long. So let me share this. Tarek, start us off. Talk about, first of all, what is ROI and why is it important?
Well, it's a great question. And the theme, I believe, this really came from multiple conversations that we would run into with people at different conferences, customers. The theme was, how do I show the value of my work? And it's the number one thing that employees forget about discipline. It doesn't really matter what you do. People want to feel like they're providing value. And for internal communicators especially, that was the question. How do I show the value of what I do? And the answer to that begins with well, let's measure some things. And then we want to show how those things positively impact your business. How are the things that you do positively impacting the business itself? And so ROI in general, forget about internal communications. This is not specific to internal comms. This is just a generic concept that lots of different organizations or parts of your organization are already using. So when you think about marketing, sales, operations, they're already talking in this framework. And ROI at its basic level stands for return on investment. So it means you're going to do something. What should I expect for what you're about to do? And if you think about it on a personal level, so I think we even talked about this during the podcast, the idea of I'm going to open a checking account. What is the interest they're going to pay you? What is that bank going to pay you? And so that is the return on your investment. If you buy stocks, what is the return on that investment, or mutual fund? Well, it's the exact same idea. It's just internally. And we're going to now talk about it in the very specific context of internal communication. So that's the high level idea.
Okay. So is there an actual calculation? So, because in the internal comms world, this has sort of become like a buzzword. And does it mean measurement? Does it mean just, hey, I'm valuable? Like, what exactly? And we talked about this on the podcast, but is there an actual calculation?
There is. So I think it's on the next slide, and it's really super simple math. And I talked to so many communicators that said, I love storytelling, I love journalism, and I went into communication because I don't really like math. And I don't want the word math to scare you away, because this really is the secret. So the whole real subtext of this episode, the 2 episodes, is how do you become part of this, get a seat at the table, leadership, how do you get them to listen to you? It is this. And this math is so simple. It is just subtraction, division, and multiplication, and that is it. So the example here is, and the formula is, what are you actually gaining? What does it cost you to get there? You divide by the cost and multiply by 100, and that is it. And we're going to show you some examples of how this would translate into the internal comms world, but that is it. So even if you say, I don't like math, I'm telling you that this is super simple, and it will change your perspective and how you are perceived within your organization.
And it's always reported as a percentage. I know that you mentioned that, and we're going to get into actually how you speak ROI. But talk about this, and talk about, I thought it was interesting in the podcast, your correlation between how marketing was and what it is now, and sort of this trajectory that you find, with you and your company being kind of ahead of the game, I feel like, in front of us, where you see internal comms trending. You mentioned that in the episode. Briefly talk about that now.
Sure. So if you think, 30 years ago, so this is all pre-internet, and the work that marketing was doing, there was no real measurement around it. It was all touchy-feely. And if you've watched Mad Men, that's what I think of when I think of marketing 30 years ago. It was just, hey, we think this will look good or be effective. You can't even really measure it. And so they weren't really taken that seriously, right? There was no chief marketing officer 30 years ago. That didn't exist. And now every company has one. Why? Because you can actually show the value of what you're doing. And so when I think about that and how does that translate internally to internal communicators, it is the same thing. It is, if we can start measuring what we're doing, just like they can measure their marketing activity and drive it and attach it to results, why can't we do the same thing internally? So that's the first piece. And then the second piece, which is really being accelerated, I think, is COVID. So we'll talk about that and what does COVID mean in terms of how internal communicators are viewed, and then how does ROI and COVID work together. This is the real, I think this is the tipping point in the history of internal communication, is this year. I know it was crazy for a lot of people, maybe still is crazy for a lot of people in internal comms, But I think we're going to look back and say this was the year, 2020 was the year when things changed dramatically for how internal comms is viewed within an organization.
All right, so let's get into it. Give us some examples of how does marketing speak, and then we're going to do an actual example of how to calculate ROI. I know we're going to give the great calculator everybody loves. It's an Excel calculator. We'll put it in the follow-up, but talk to us about marketing, and then you're going to walk us through an example.
Yeah, so this is exactly how they would speak. So when they're talking to leadership, when they talk internally, it is this type of language. So what they'll do is they'll say, hey, this is what we did, and it had an ROI of 300% or whatever the percentage is. And that is how leadership thinks and understands. Everything is communicated in this way, whether it's sales, marketing, operations, they all talk this way. And so if you are coming to the table and you're not speaking like this, you're talking about how many likes the video got or comments, that does not provide direct value to the business, right? There's a missing couple of steps. This is direct value. So marketing is saying, we drove $2 million in sales, which represents a 300% ROI. And the math behind that, it sounds cool, but the math behind this is so easy. And I think we'll walk through that as to how they got there. So basically, this is it. This is the whole thing. It is, hey, we had $2 million in new sales that we can directly attribute to our marketing efforts. Our marketing efforts for this campaign cost the company $500,000. So all we're doing is subtraction, division, and then multiply by 100 to get to a percentage. That is the whole thing.
All right. Well, and again, tune into the episode. We get into really good questions like, how do you know if you have a good ROI? We get into some other terms like hurdle rate, but again, you tune in and check those out. We've got great resource guides that also lays all of this out for you as well. We'll link it all in the follow-up, but let's actually walk through an internal comms example. So you've got this great scenario of digitizing your employee news. Let's walk through the math of how we actually would calculate the ROI on something like this.
Yeah, so this was just a made up, simplified example to show this is the process I would go through if it were me. And so the first thing you would say is, how are we going to help the business? So before you even go down this road, you would ask, is this in line with what we want to achieve as a business? If the answer is yes, maybe leadership said, hey, one of our goals this year is more timely employee communication. And that's a great goal to have. But more people informed, great. So how I would think about that is, what are we doing today? And I just made up numbers. These could be way off base. But let's just assume that this is what we're spending today for our company. We're spending $53,000 to print and mail 4 newsletters per year. And that's how I came up to that number. Then I compare that with, what's the cost if we went digital and we wanted to email a newsletter every month? And so I compare the two. So now I've got my 2 numbers. That's it. And if you don't have some of these numbers, you can always go to different departments. We will talk about some different examples involving retention or open enrollment or things like that. You can just go to those people and ask, what are these numbers, to fill in the blanks. But this one is pretty simple. So all you're doing is taking, hey, we were spending $53,000 a year. Now we'll be spending $26,000. So you subtract. So you get $27,000 divided by your 26, which is your new cost. And that gives you 1.038 multiplied by 100. So that would be 103, we'll just call it 104%. Once you have that, now you go back to leadership and say, here's what I'm recommending. Here's what I want to do, and here's why. Now you've got the numbers behind it. It's not because I went to a conference and this looks cool, or I talked to this vendor and this looks cool, right? That's all feel. This is a number that leadership understands. It shows you've done your homework and you're really thinking about, how do I add value to this business? And when you speak this way, that is what they're expecting. And it's not that hard. It's really super simple.
Yeah. And I love that you've got the example here, because I get nervous. It's like, well, how do I actually say it? And we give examples like this, you know, in the podcast and on the guide, but I love how we've written this here. You know, if we move to digital communication, our employees' newsletters, we're looking at 104% ROI annually, not to mention more timely communication to our employees. I love that you walk us through and actually give us the words to say to leadership.
Yeah, it's just tying back to this is what we do and how we're going to continue to add value to this company. That's what we're doing here.
Well, I want to also move to a question we got before the show aired, and we made a slide just so that you could walk us through it too. One of the things that happens when people become more aware of how to communicate with leadership, especially now that, you know, internal communicators, whether you chose to be there or not, COVID thrusted everybody at the leadership table. So we want to keep that spot. But now that we have not only our work, it seems like there's some things like, does everything need an ROI on it? So the question that we got is, when do you calculate ROI? And so walk us through kind of the points of like, not everything I do am I going to calculate ROI on, right?
Right, that's correct, right? Not everything is worth what's the benefit of doing that? And so you really have to ask yourself, when do I do it? And the answer is, and this is my recommendation, best practice, is when that thing has a financial impact to the business. It's directly related. So some examples of direct relationship to financial impact to the business would be things like open enrollment. And you could go to your friends in HR and you could say, what is the financial benefit for each employee that enrolls? Because I'm sure they've done the math of this and they've done the analysis, and they could say every time someone enrolls, it is worth X to this company. Awesome. So now what you want to do is you want to show we increased open enrollment in 2020 over 2019 because of this campaign that we did. Could be video, could be whatever you want to do. And now you can say, hey, this campaign that we did, just like marketing. Marketing said we spent $500,000 to increase sales by 2 million. You could say, we're going to spend $50,000 on this open enrollment campaign, but we believe it will drive additional enrollment. And you can show the ROI. It's a direct relationship to financial benefit to the business. So that's an easy one, right? And if you're not taking credit for this, and this is probably the biggest mistake or the most heads I see shaking when we talk about this idea, is all these communicators say, well, I'm already doing this, but I never take credit for my work. Yes, you should absolutely be taking credit for this. Because now when you want more resources for 2021, you can show what you did. And it becomes a no-brainer to leadership. Hey, if you spent 50 and you returned $1 million, we should be doing that all day long. What else do you need? That should be the question they are now asking you, because you have the ROI to help prove your case. Okay. Where you wouldn't do it is things like clicks on videos, open rates, click rates. Those are measurements, and they're a means to an end, and they will help with things like engagement scores and help you with your comm strategy, but it's not directly tied to financial benefit to the business. So that differentiation makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, well, keep us going. I think there's a few other buckets that give us a signal of things we're not taking credit for, or things where we would need to calculate ROI. You've got customer satisfaction up here. Talk about that.
So same thing, right? So someone in the organization has already done the work of knowing what is the value of a satisfied customer. So let's say you're doing an internal communication campaign around how we treat our customers. And you can now monitor, hey, our customer satisfaction was here and now it went up to here. There is a defined direct benefit to the business when that happens, and you should be taking credit for this. That's the missing piece. They're all doing great work. They're just not taking credit for the work that they're doing. And then when it comes time to, I need more resources, they're always fighting for resources, scratching, clawing, because they haven't shown and proven the value of what they've done because they don't take credit for it. So it's right in front of you. And these are just some examples. The idea of our employees' time is expensive. What if we could make it more efficient? So they don't have to search for information. They're not asking us as many questions. They're not seeing duplicate information. That is an easy calculation to make and provides direct value to the business, reducing errors. And this is just a super small sampling because every business is different. So anything that you can think of that provides direct value and you have a hand in that, take credit for that. And ROI is your secret entry into that club, is when you start talking this way and showing the value of what you're doing, getting resources becomes much easier down the road.
Okay, so now we are going to go to Gina. I think we did get another question come through for Tarek on this.
Yeah, we did. So it was really cool seeing you break down that ROI language as to what it should actually look like. But this question wants to know, how can they make that transition to this new ROI language and this way of thinking, especially if they're already known as a department that really doesn't speak this way?
Yeah, and the funny thing is, they want you to speak this way. Everybody else in the company speaks this way, and it will feel foreign to you in the beginning just because you've never done it, just like anything else. But you will be shocked at when you first do one of these calculations, and I always offer my services. I'm on LinkedIn, email, whatever. Ask me. And I've had communicators take me up on this, where they're like, hey, I'm ready to do this for the first time. Will you double check my math? Does this language sound right before I go back in and present? And I love doing it. We talked about it in the podcast, but my background is math and engineering, and I'm super nerdy about all of this stuff. So I love it when communicators finally take that leap, and then what they will do, they will be nervous the first time or two or three. And then after that, a lot of them follow up with me and say, you will not believe how this was received. They love it, right? This is what they've been expecting the whole time. It's just different for you. Trust me, I guess is, I feel now like a politician, but trust me on this, you're going to love it.
All right. Well, I can't thank you enough for presenting. It looks like we got another question. I know we're over time, so if you do have to hop off, we're going to record this and we'll send you the recording. We are just going to spend a few more minutes so that we can answer this question that just came in from, again, one of our panelists. What is your suggestion of when to present the ROI of your IC efforts, given no great event triggers throughout the year, like during an evaluation? Is it an annual leadership meeting? All of the above? And how do you insert the idea to membership if you haven't ever been invited to the table? So again, when do you present the ROI of your IC efforts? If there's no particular, trigger of when that would make sense. Let's start with that question first.
Yeah, so I think there are certain things like we're looking at right here. Those are kind of time-based. Open enrollment's a great example. Everybody's doing it. Nobody takes credit for it. So let's say you've got those, great. So you could do it after open enrollment concludes. That's an easy one. I would say when you are being evaluated. So leading up to your evaluation. Doesn't matter where in the organization you report into, HR, operations, legal, finance, marketing, doesn't really matter. When they are looking at, hey, what did IC provide to this business? That is where you have now a list. You are ready. Hey, these are the things that we really focused on this year. And I picked these things because I know our corporate goals stated at the beginning of the year were this. They were these three things. I wanted to make sure our work was aligned with moving those goals forward. And here's what we did. You can have the data, you can prove everything that you did. So that's another time to do it. I think any time that you are thinking about changing your technology stack. So this one is us, right? This is what we do with all of our customers or potential customers. We will show them the ROI of doing this. It has to make financial sense to your business. And so if you're thinking about changing how you do internal email, adding a mobile app, upgrading your intranet, all these things, right? You should have a projected ROI to make your case. Nobody from a leadership level understands, I feel like this is the right thing to do. That doesn't resonate with them. They want to see, if we do this, so take that employee time example. If we upgrade our intranet, we're expecting an ROI of whatever, 157%, and here's why. We're going to save our employees this much time and whatever, and it's in line with our goals for this year, plus our employees are working remotely. Like, that's exactly how you would write it out. So I think there's multiple places to do it. Again, you don't do it every time, but the ones that we're talking about are a direct financial impact to the business.
And I know that you mentioned you actually, when you are working with people looking at the Cerkl broadcast product, that you actually calculate it for them and make that business case for them, which is that something that, internal communicators should ask their vendors to help them do?
I think yes. I mean, it doesn't really matter whether you're looking at us or anybody else. I think it is the process that you need to be going through. And we want them to think through all the costs associated with it, because it looks like you've really done your homework. And so we want to be super transparent with people. Here's what we've seen. Here's what you can expect. So I think yes is the answer to that. And there was one other part to that question, which I think is really powerful. How do you get a seat at the table if you've never been asked? And I spoke a little bit about that in our podcast episode, actually probably a lot. When I listened to it again, I felt like, wow, I said the same thing 57,000 times. But it was COVID. So this is the tie to COVID. So one of the trends, the macro trends that we've been seeing across all industries is because of COVID, leadership has been asking internal comms to play a bigger role. How do we talk to these people? The remote now, or whatever the case is, we need your help and guidance. And so they are listening to you. Now, what scares me is what happens when COVID dies down or is over? Do you go back to being tactical? Do you go back to being, just tell us what to do and we'll execute? So I don't think people want to be there. They like this, that they are listening to me now. The way you stay there is ROI. This is the secret. So if you have their ear, and to ensure you don't go back to where things were pre-COVID, use ROI. Show the value you're providing to the business. Marketing is thought of as unbelievably strategic to the success of any business because they can show the value of what they do. You can too. And ROI, this little teeny tiny, super simple math formula, is the secret ticket.
Well, I love that you help us with this. I love your passion, and I know you are super passionate about our collective. Real quick, because you are a sponsor, shameless plug for Cerkl. Give us in 10 seconds, what does this new broadcast product do, and how's it helping internal communicators?
Well, it's funny. I mean, we really looked at the gamut. You've got some people that they're not doing real, they're like blank canvas. So they're just doing email through Outlook. They might have an intranet that might not. So people are all at different points on the spectrum. And so we think about, how do we help them all? If you're just getting started and want to do measurement, great, we can help you. If you're ready to advance and we want everything to be personalized, we want AI to drive it and build a Netflix experience, cool, we can help you. If you want to add mobile to your stack and you just want to turn that on that day, awesome, we can help you. So that's how we've thought about it, is we want to be very adaptive to the different internal comms environments, but give them a plan for growth. So start here, and then as you grow, we want to make sure that we can support you.
Yeah. Well, and I know you've listened to so many of our folks give you feedback, and even the demo process is not really like your typical creepy sales demo. I mean, people have even watched those demos and are like, wow, I learned so much. I now know where I can go, but where internal comms is going and how to save me time. So I just thank you for always helping us and helping position us favorably, and your passion for this on a personal level and a professional level. Thank you for supporting me and for Internal Comms Pro. And Gina, if you wouldn't mind, I think we've got one more slide here to kind of promote the episode. Gina, take it away and wrap us up here.
Absolutely. We've kept referring to the podcast episode. We actually had 2 episodes with Tarek. So if you're interested on that, feel free to go to our website at internalcommspro.com/podcast, and you'll be able to find all of our podcast episodes there.
Yeah,
And so if you go to the next slide.
Yeah, one quick thing too I wanted to say about that episode. I got overwhelmed quickly with ROI, and I said, can't you just make in Excel a simple calculator so that I don't screw this up? So we also talk about that on the episode, but we'll put that in the follow-up email. Tarek, thanks for making it easy for us to do that too. All right, back to you, Gina.
All right. So if you liked our show, we'll be at it again, not next Monday, but the Monday after on October 26th at 1 p.m. once again. We'll be having Greg Bardsley from Equinix on, and we're excited to talk with him. And also you saw our lovely opening act from Greg, how it was just awesome. I loved it. But if you're interested in doing that as well, within our follow-up email, we'll have an option for you to get in contact with us with any crazy or just normal talent you might have. We would love to see it. So feel free to get in contact with us on that. But thank you all so much for sticking with us, and we hope you enjoyed our show.
Thanks again, Tarek, for joining us today.
Great job. Thank you for having me.